We're going to really focus tonight on sort of just navigation, getting to know the windows, the panels, the general interface, and how it just flows. Okay, and I know some of you have worked with Premiere, but so again, tonight and the next maybe week or two might be repetitive for you. You may know what we're already talking about, but we'll pick up from there. Uh, I promise. Okay. I will post this on Blackboard. I'll just email it to the class as well. So this is based on the keyboard that we have in the lab. Okay, so we are going to be working, especially these on the lower left. Okay, for the Mac folks. So I'll try to bop back and forth, but Control Save is Command S, of course, on the Apple. So hopefully you already know this. Because it's even though there's not like a lot of prerequisites here, if you're working on a Mac, you should hopefully know how to navigate the basic keys, right? Which are just whether you're working in Premiere or not. Okay. We'll get into these. We'll talk about zooming in and out, magnifying, right? So these are the keys there on the Mac. And of course, I will demonstrate what keys we do here on the PC. These will come in handy, these arrow keys. So when I talk about arrow keys, these are roughly the same place as they are on a PC keyboard, but that there they are on the Mac. You've got the home and end key. Enter. Really, we're just going to be dealing with some of these basic ones. And then we've got I and O, which is the same thing pretty much on the PC, right? This will stand for in and out. Okay. And then you got these JKL keys. They're highlighted for a reason. These are additional navigation keys. Also the same thing on the PC. Okay. So a lot of it isn't really that different, right? You've got Command C, Command V, which is Control C, Control V on the Mac. I'm sorry, on the PC. Okay. So we'll leave it at that and I will share that. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me go back and just unzip those files. All right. Pretty straightforward stuff. Here they are. I'm going to just click on them here and I'm going to click. Hang on a second. There we go. Just extract. All right. So I'm going to just extract all. It's going to say, yeah, just save them in the same spot. It's going to do this, blah, blah, blah. And there they are. They create like a duplicate folder. So I'm going to close that for a minute. So they're actually in here. These are the unzipped files. Okay. And then when you open that up, it gives you another subfolder. And then there's your clips. We're just using 3 clips tonight. These are actually 3 of the clips that we'll be using in project 1, but they're the first 3 clips just so we can get practice. So leave that at this folder level here because we're going to import that in a few minutes. All right, so let's go back and go ahead and launch Premiere. Let me go back to my screen. All right. And we're going to go ahead and launch Premiere, which is right down here on my taskbar down here in the bottom. So go ahead and launch. And as a reminder, I do record these sessions and I will hopefully try to get them posted tomorrow, depending on the schedule. All right. And okay, so I'll give everybody a second to get here. All right, so this is the basic welcome screen, right? We saw this last week. It lists you a number of things. You can create a new project, which is what we're going to do in a minute. You can open an existing project. And you also have a list down here where you can scroll up and down and see some of your more recent projects that you were working on. So if one of them is what you need to go into, you can always go into that and it gives you a basic timestamp, etc. Okay. All right. So we're just going to do a new project. So we're going to just click on new project. And we actually have to name it and actually save it in a specific location before we actually get into Premiere. Okay. So over here in the project name, when we do these, everybody, when it's just an exercise, we're just going to name it an exercise. This is not being graded or anything. We're just going to learn how to do stuff. So then you can apply what we learn in these exercises to your actual projects. Pretty straightforward, right? As I mentioned, it's a very demonstrative class. So let's just name this exercise and today's date. I'm going to do 1/29/24. Okay, simple enough. And before you go and hit create on the very bottom, you want to go to project location. This is critical, very important. Okay, hit the drop down and navigate to that exercise folder because it may or may not be already there. You can always check. Mine probably is right now. If I hover my mouse over this, you can see it's telling me, actually, this is not where I want to be, right? This is in a different place that I don't want to be. So generally, I will hit the drop down and go to choose location. Okay. Right. And you can see some previous places. So I could actually pretty much go there because, yeah, I do want to go to my exercise folder. But you want to make sure that's the correct file path. So I know that this is, yep, that's a correct file path. So I'll just click that. That's an option if it's already showing up. If not, you're gonna go down here, choose location, then it's gonna give you the navigator, right? And you're gonna have to go find it. So I know I'm going to be in spring 2024 exercise and select that folder, which essentially is the same thing, right? Right. So it's you can see I selected it. All right. And then once you do that, then you come down to the lower right-hand corner and you hit create new project. Okay. And then that's going to open up Premiere. Okay. And what we got into last week was sort of adjusting and reworking workspaces. Okay. So let's find a common workspace that everybody is looking at. And then we'll customize it so we're all working in the same workspace. Okay. And I just stress this when we start at the beginning of the semester. So when I'm demoing everything we're doing, demonstrating we're doing, and I click on a window, you're looking at the same window. Once you start your projects, you can pretty much set up your workspace however you like. So what you should have now, you have your project, a panel on the left, and it says exercise because this is where we house our clips and our assets. So it's gonna always display the name of the project that you created, hence exercise. Source is going to be this middle panel where we're going to look at one clip at a time. Program is going to give us a composite of what's going on down here in the timeline. These are basically monitors, source and program. And then the timeline is kind of like the workbench where we do a lot of the work. To the right, we're going to have some basic, what we call master meters, overall audio levels coming out of the timeline. For this project, it won't be that complicated. And then on the left is your typical tools palette, right, that you see in a lot of the graphic design programs. Okay, so now that we've got this set up, now you can save this as your own workspace, right? So you can go up to Window, Workspace, and instead of like we've been doing reset to save layout, now you want to save this as a new workspace. Okay, so this is Window Workspaces. Go over to the right, go all the way down, and say Save as New Workspace. And then click on that. You get a dialog box and name it whatever you want. Okay, so I'm going to use my initials. I'm going to call it Basic Edit Spring 2024. Basic Edit. So I name it, then I hit OK. Right? It's going to get added to that list when I go back up to Window Workspace. Of course, it's highlighting it because I'm currently in it, so it puts the little locator on there, but you can see that's where I'm at. And so if for some reason I jump into one of these other ones, they look a little different. This one's designed more for audio, and you accidentally click on one of those, you can just go right back to the one you created. Where am I? There you go, Basic Edit Spring 2024. And when you click on that, it reconfigures it to what you set up. And if for some reason you butcher it a little bit, you mess something up, you close a panel and whatever, maybe you move that and you're like, oh my God, I did all this. Wild guess, you go back and you do reset to save layout, right? Because you know you were in your um, basic edit, right? You can see that you were in that basic edit. Now you want to go back and reset to save layout. Okay, and it will put it back. So this is just kind of like an insurance policy. Hopefully it's stress reduction, because I'm all about stress reduction in editing. And that way you can always get back to that workspace. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to go into this left panel that says project panel, because this is where we house all our assets, our video, our music, our sound, our graphics, our still images, whatever, audio effects, you name it. Okay. So, and as you've probably known if you've worked with Premiere, because based on talking to everybody last week, a lot of people have worked with other Premiere program, other Adobe programs. Generally, there'll be 2, 3, 4, possibly even 5 ways to do the same thing. Okay, Adobe is very flexible about that. It likes to give people, their different workflows, and everybody will do it differently. So I may do it one way, and then you may prefer to do it a different way. So importing is essentially creating a link to those source files that we downloaded and have in our exercise folder. We're going to create a link in this project panel. Okay. And you can obviously see it says import media to start. So there's a couple ways to do it. You can come up here to file, right? And you navigate and you come on down to import. And you click on that, and then you're going to get a dialog box. You also have the shortcut, which is Control I. And I think on the Mac, whatever control is on the Mac, which is maybe, actually it's Command. So it would be Command I, right? So right there, there's 2 ways to do it, right? Another way that's actually easier is to just simply double click in this window, right? You literally double click and it opens up the dialog box, the navigation window, and you go and find your clips, right? Right. So there's a couple ways to do it. You can also, let me see, hang on, is there another, let's go with those 3. There's another way. If you have like a big screen, you can actually open the other window, right? You could have that exercise folder off to the side and then literally just drag it into this window. Okay, but let's go ahead and just do double click right here in the import media area, double click, and go and find your clips, right? So because I was just in here, it kind of like remembers that I was in the exercise folder, but if it took you to like, the desktop and your stuff's not there, then you have to find it, okay? So go and find your stuff, and you're just simply gonna import it. So I know I have mine in my spring 2024 exercise folder, and there it is. It's that OneDrive folder, right? And I'm gonna hit import folder. Give it a second, and it will bring in the entire folder and the clips inside it. Okay, and there it is. And if you double click it, well, it has a subfolder in there, which is fine. I generally pull it out, right? So you can see that I double clicked and it's still a folder because it's inside this folder. And you have your little arrow so you can go back up one level. Okay, so double click and you've got your clips. Okay, so these are the 3 clips we downloaded, and you've got different views, right? So this is kind of like a little poster frame image. And if you kind of hover your mouse here, and the reason it's showing me is because I select right here an icon view. Okay, I can do icon view. I can also do list view, right? Which gives me this view. And I have this sort of freeform view, right? A little bigger, right? I tend to go with this one when I get busy because it allows me to have more clips in the panel. So for grins, let's just go with list view, right? It's going to give you the name of the clip. It's going to show you purple and green, meaning it's a video clip, and it also has audio. Okay, and this little ring will, if you drag it, you can adjust the size of that. So in this case, we only have a few clips, and you can sort of expand that, and you can see. If it didn't have green, it would only have video. If it didn't have the video and only the audio, then that's all it has. And then you have these columns here. Okay, you have a little slider, right? And you can slide and you can see a whole bunch of information about this, right? One of the things you see is what's called the video info, which we'll touch on before we close out tonight, right? These are properties of video. This is resolution, image size, etc. The technical part of video, the audio bit rate here. Now it's not the bit rate, it's the hertz. And then you've got whatever. Let me see. Uh, you've got duration of these clips. Okay, these are sort of raw, unedited clips, and this is the frame rate. We talked about last week that we're going to primarily work with video that's 30 frames per second. These days, there's lots of different frame rates. Traditional video is 30 frames per second. Film, which we talked about a little bit last week, is 24 frames per second traditionally, right? And anyway, all right, so everybody got those clips okay in there? Okay, you've imported them, you've got them in your project panel. Okay, you can rename that folder if you want, but we won't have to right now, and we're just gonna sort of navigate. Okay, so let's go back in. All right, and I'm just gonna sort of scale this down, and you can see the names: keys 1, keys 2, walkout. Okay, so let's go ahead and double click on keys 1. When you do that, it opens up in the source panel. Okay, and you can see also as I click on these, I can resize them, right? If I want my source panel to be a little bigger, program panel, if I want to push up, and I can make my timeline a little taller. So it's a very elastic workspace, right? Okay, so now we're looking at one raw clip. Okay, and you've got a basic little ruler here, which is kind of like its own little timeline, similar to what you have down here. And you have this blue like knob that you see, right? You see me grabbing it, right? And if I click along the ruler, it follows my mouse. Okay, so this is very important. This identifies what you're actually looking at, right? I'm going through frames, right? When you do this kind of movement and you're holding it and you have your audio up, you can hear the audio a little bit. There's not a lot of audio on this. It's just kind of ambient sound of me coming down the steps. But you can hear the keys there. Okay, that's called scrubbing. Okay, and you notice as I move it, these numbers move. We're going to talk about those numbers in a second. You also have this number on the right side that doesn't move. Okay, so the difference is what this is measuring over here on the right, and you can see that I can hover over that. It says in-out duration. Okay, meaning where the clip begins, where the clip ends. And because I haven't altered it, I haven't created an edit, I haven't selected a section of it, right now it's showing me the entire duration. It's measuring this clip as 22 seconds. This is the raw clip, right? You see? But what's happening here is I set up the camera and I'm shooting myself doing stuff. So I was doing this all by myself. So I have to set up the camera and then go upstairs and then come back down the stairs because the shot is me coming down the stairs and grabbing the keys. All right. So this number on the left, okay, so this is all related to something called timecode. Okay. And we're going to pull that up on that PowerPoint that I put on Blackboard. Okay, timecode, TIMECOED. You may have heard of it if you've done some shooting, you've worked some of the programs. All right. So timecode is, and I should have had the 16 millimeter with me. I'll have it next week. It's kind of like the digital version when you think of film of those little sprocket holes in the film, right? In traditional film, when you were shooting with film, and you were closed caption transcripts being generated. Okay, that's all good. whether in the camera or playing it back or editing. That's how, the machine, the camera, the projector knew how to play it at its, what we call in its real time, in its native speed, native format. In its actual, it gave it a consistent rate, so that if someone was talking, they weren't speaking too fast or too slow. You could slow it down, you could speed it up. There was different techniques then. But those sprocket holes gave it a way to you for to measure it and actually give it a constant rate. And that's what timecode does. That's what this does electronically, digitally. Okay. All right. So what do these numbers mean? You notice as I scrub through, I can see these numbers advancing, right? So all of these, I recorded them in, they all start at 0. And as you move forward, you actually count from right to left. And you can see here, by the way, this thing, I don't think I mentioned to you what it's called. I think I did last week. This is called, Adobe calls it the current time indicator, CTI, the current time indicator. That takes an hour and a half to say. So we tend to just refer to it as the playhead. And if you hover your mouse here, I think it just did it a minute ago, right? It's actually known as the playhead, but anyway, we'll just call it the playhead. And when you move it, it's going to advance frame by frame, you see? And I can just grab this. Other navigation tools are right down here. Step forward 1 frame, right. Step forward 1 frame, left. You can hit this and you can go frame by frame. So speaking of frames, here's how we count this. From right to left, this first column here is frames. This next column is seconds. This column is minutes. This column is hours. So you can see, because this is only 22 seconds, we never get past that second column, right? Right? And now if I take this all the way to the end, I get the same number there as here because I am on that final frame. Okay? So this is a big part of editing. It's going to be a big part of project 1. I'm going to wind up giving you a sheet with a bunch of video and shots with time codes, and you're going to mark this stuff and string a bunch of shots together. Okay? Kind of typical as the kind of script you might get when you're editing something. Okay? All right, so let's go back. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a basic edit here. Okay? Because generally what editing is selecting a section of something, right? Lifting a piece of something larger, but only the part you want to keep. So we don't want all of this. This is just setting up because I had to start recording because I had to go far away to actually execute the action, right? So here we're going to mark what's known as an in point and then an out point, okay? And that will be the section that we're going to keep. So it's sort of like digitally using a little razor blade, cutting, and that little section in the middle we're going to lift, and then we're going to put it in the timeline. Okay. All right. So let's go here. All right. So we're going to start this with me coming down the stairs. Let's say right about here. Let's even it out. So can anybody tell me what number I'm looking at right now? Let me go back one. What value is that? Can anybody tell me?
12 seconds.
12 seconds. Exactly. There you go. 12 seconds, right? We're in that second category. It says 12:00. Okay. So that's going to be our endpoint. And here's how we mark that. There's a number of different ways you can mark it, right? You can use these things right here, right? These little sort of brackets. Hang on, it's not giving me the highlight. Okay. Usually it says in point, in out. Okay. So if we know that 12 is our endpoint, I'm trying to come down the stairs, I can click this and it puts a little bracket right there. You see how it did that? Let me undo. I'm going to Control Z, Command Z, right? So this is the part of the clip that I'm going to select as my beginning. And then I'm going to select the part that's going to be my end. So I position it at 12. And as far as positioning at 12, if you drank some espresso, some really dark roast coffee, and you had 3 cigarettes before editing, then maybe it's a little hard to nudge your mouse on that 12 seconds. You can actually use your little arrow keys. You can get close to it. Or you can also use arrow keys on your keyboard, similar to the ones I just showed you on the Macintosh keyboard. Okay, right? I should actually pull up the PC one. So if you look on your keyboard, you can use your arrow keys, right, left and right, and you can click on the source panel and you can go forward and back. Okay. If you prefer, you can do this. You can get close and you can go get right to 12. Boom. Now, in addition to this, you can also go to your keyboard and hit I, as I mentioned a minute ago, and then we're going to hit O. But first, hit I, and it will put that same marker right in that same spot. Okay. So let's open that up. Hit I. Oh, I'm sorry. You have to click in that panel so it's active, right? Because if it's not active, anything you do is not going to respond. Okay, so we're going to say I, and it marks an endpoint. It also gives you this little icon, this little guide right here. So right now you've created what's known as an endpoint, IN, right? So now I'm going to scrub through the action. I come down, look at my watch, grab the keys, and then I exit the frame. Okay. So now I'm going to go just past my hand getting out of frame, right? And I'm ending frame left, right? So that technically puts me at 7:23, 17 seconds and 23 frames. I'm going to go 2 more frames and position the playhead at 7:25 and mark out. And there you go. There's the shortcut. You can also hit O on your keyboard, right? So I'm going to hit O on my keyboard, and it puts that other out point right there. Okay, so now, right, our in point is 12, our out point is 17:25, and you notice how this changed because now that's measuring the in and out duration, right? Initially, because we hadn't done an edit, the in is at the very beginning and the out is at the very end, so it showed you the whole duration of the clip. And now you've selected just shy of 6 seconds of this. Okay, and you're like, well, how come 6 seconds? It says 5:26. Here's why, because we're editing 30 frames per second. All right, so I'm gonna click on here and I'm gonna go forward a couple frames, right? And you can see here over here, 17:26, 17:27, 28. It's gonna go to 29, and then instead of 30, it's not gonna go to 17:30. The next number is going to be 18, right? Because that's your 30th, technically, your beginning of that new second. Okay, so that's how you know it's 30 seconds, 30 frames per second, because 29 is the last frame, then it goes to 0. So you will never see the frames go higher than than um, than 29. Okay, so if you want to double check your endpoints, you can go to in, and the shortcut there is Shift plus I. There's lots of shortcuts for all of these. And you can go to the out point. So let me go back and check my in point. Yep, 12 seconds. You see how it jumped to that point, and I'm going to go to out point. Yep, 7:25. That's what I want. So my duration is 5 seconds, 26 frames. Now, I want to take this and drop it in my timeline. And I can just grab it anywhere right in the center. When you click and drag, it's going to give you a fist, and it's going to also bring the audio, right? You bring it down into your timeline and you let go, and it populates your timeline. It puts this clip in there, right? And there it is. And it's showing you only what you selected. All of this other gray area here, nothing's wrong with it. I mean, nothing's deleted. It's still there. It's just you're just not using it, right? And in the old film days, that would have been like sitting on the floor, right? And so you better get it right. That's the beauty. This is digital. Okay, if you have to adjust it, you can. Nothing's destroyed. Nothing's deleted. Nothing's really affected outside of what you selected, right? You've just made your selection and you're dropping it in. Okay? All right. So now a couple of things are happening here. Obviously, my timeline looks different. let me push up here so I can get a little bit more of a view, right? I've got the clip. It says keys 1, and again, you've got this ruler, and it's following the same time code. All of these are reading the same time code. Okay, right? And there's my clip, right? So that's the current state of my project right now. And what this is, with these tracks in here, right? You've got video tracks up top, you've got audio tracks down here. This is known as a sequence. Okay. And again, I'll highlight all this in this PowerPoint. This is a sequence. The sequence lives in the timeline. The timeline is like the basic panel. And then the sequence is an assortment of clips that you're constructing and putting together. You can have multiple sequences open in a timeline. You can have multiple sequences within the same project. Okay, more on that later. All right. Another thing that's happening is when you drop this in is now it has figured out the best settings for your project. The settings are the basic environment that your video is going to play in, right? Because when you dropped it in, it figured out what kind of clip you had, what kind of format it was, the dimensions, the frame rate, and it went ahead and it created it. Okay, and you can check that right up here in sequence when you go sequence settings. Okay, and it's going to show you right now. It's showing you that this is 30 frames. Now you say 29.97. Just round that off to 30. You can see your frame size. These are your dimensions. 920 pixels horizontal, 1080 pixels vertical. This is standard HD, high definition. Okay. You go beyond that, then you start getting into the 4K, the higher resolutions. Okay. There it is displayed again. Then there's the sample rate, and here is more information, etc. Okay. So that's just a reference. You can close that out. And the whole idea is to create the optimal environment for your clips. So when you read about editing or you look it up and you look at systems and stuff, they'll talk about things like real time. Real time is a fully rendered, realized clip that's playing at its native, in its native state. And it's not really native state. It's playing in its at its full capacity. Okay, it's like speaking the language of the country. Okay, how did you get there again? Feel free to speak, folks. The chat is okay, but I'm not sure what you mean. How did you get there again? Get there where? How did I get the clip in the timeline? Hmm? If you can respond vocally, because then I don't have to jump back and forth in the stop share. Hang on, let's see. General. Did you get there? Okay. Well, what I did here is, okay, here, I'm gonna go ahead and delete this for a minute, right? I'm gonna get this out of here. Okay, right. So I brought this clip, keys 1, I dragged it in, I double clicked it, it shows up here. I marked an in point and an out point, right, with these little markers, also in and out, I and O on the keyboard, and I highlight this little section, right? So within the 22 seconds, I'm selecting close to 6 seconds. And then I grab it and I just drop it right into the timeline. Okay. Again, don't worry if everything isn't going perfectly. You can go back and watch this, and the tutorials I have on Blackboard will also walk you through it. This is why I'm doing this as an exercise. Next week, we'll actually start, probably we'll be starting project 1. So you can actually start editing on your own. Okay. Okay, so now we're in the timeline, and what it also has done is it's created a sequence, right? And it's created these tracks. This is the default sequence, 3 video layers up top and 3 audio layers on the bottom. Now this is actually, it also creates the sequence here, but now we're inside this folder. We have to step out of it, close that up, and where is it? There it is. Okay. I actually created 2 because I deleted one. So let me delete one. So there it is. So when you see something like this, let me make that a little bigger. See how it looks different than the video clip. Let me expand this. That is what a sequence looks like in your project panel. That's the icon. This is a video clip with audio, and this is a sequence. And so right now, because the clip I dropped in is keys one, it names it keys one. But you can click on this and call it sequence one, for example, right? So you can rename that sequence one, okay? And when you click, it renames it sequence one, right? Right? And hang on, let me bring that back in. There it is. Okay. So now I've got my first clip. And if you go to the end of it, it's exactly as I measured it, 5 seconds and 26 frames. Okay. Now, other navigational things in here, you can make these tracks taller. You can drag these little rings, right? And increase the height of the track. It doesn't make any sort of material
I have a
change
question.
to your clip, right? It's just making it taller. You can
I have
also
a
do the same
question.
thing. Yeah, 1 second. You can do the same thing down here with your audio. Okay, so you can adjust those sizes, and there are shortcuts to that. I think it's Control Plus. I'm not sure. Yes, question.
You were talking about a 4K and the frame rate. How'd you get to that panel?
Oh, when we were looking at the settings?
Yes.
Yeah, over here. All right, so I'm down here in the sequence, right? And I went up to sequence here on the main menu. I click on it and I go to sequence settings. And then when you click on that, it opens up your current settings. And that is based on the clip, right? So you can create your own sequences in advance, but you can also bring in your material and drop it into the sequence, and the sequence, the computer will figure out the best settings for that clip because it can read the information from that video. Okay. So that's where that is. And we'll talk more about that. I'm kind of giving you the overview now with the overall navigation, right? All right. So now in the program, you're seeing the action in your timeline. And you see the time code here rolling. So if you notice this playhead here, because you can also do it right here, this playhead in your program panel and the playhead in the timeline are synced. They're doing the exact same thing. And your time code is synced, right? Because you're basically looking at the same thing, but this is how you see it on the screen. There's no screen down here, right? If you look at your video, it's just a thumbnail, right? But here you can see the actual action. So your program has like a, think of it as like an HDMI coming out of the timeline into the program panel, okay? All right, so your first clip, that's your first clip coming down the stairs. Grab the keys. As soon as I grab the keys, my hand exits the frame. We added a couple frames and we're out. Okay. You can also reposition how this, for example, if these were really skinny, this computer doesn't have a super big screen, so I have to make the most use of my real estate on the screen. You can also click in the middle between the V and the A, and you can sort of reposition how these tracks sit. So if you needed to like emphasize more audio, you want to click here, you can drag down, emphasize more video. You can add more layers, okay? Just like you can in, for example, Photoshop, okay? So this is known as the track header area over here on the left, okay? This is your main sequence, your timeline, okay? This is your time code. This yellow line is essentially telling you that you're going to have to sort of finalize a very basic render to this clip to really play it in full time, in real time. More on that, probably more like next week. Okay. So now let me just show you a couple more things about the timeline. Best practice, you see this little magnet, it's blue. I would recommend you keep that blue. It's always selected blue by default, but if you click on it, it goes gray. And I'll explain in a minute. It allows you to do something called snapping. It's where you can jump from an edit point to another, and it's very accurate. Okay, so keep that lit blue. Okay, in the track header area, what point of the two V's? Two V's. These are multiple layers. Okay. Now we're not going to use a lot of layers on project one, right? So you've got V1 and you've got V2, V3. These are layers. So for example, and we'll do this probably at the end of this project, we'll put a title over video. So when you put a title over video, your video would be, if you want the title to sit over the video, your video would be, for example, in this case on video one, you would put a title on video two, and it would superimpose itself over the background, right? There's a hierarchy here, right? The lower layer is the background layer. The higher layer is the foreground layer. So right now, the most foreground layer is 3. The most background layer is 1. Just like, you know, when you work in Photoshop, right? That bottom layer sits at the bottom. That top layer is going to sit on top. So you have to pay attention to how you're layering all your stuff. Okay. Project one's not going to have a lot of layers. Project two will have several, if not more. Okay. So we'll get more into that. But what I wanted to show you is you can add more tracks here, right? And you can do that simply by right-clicking over here on the right in this area. Don't click on that. Let's put that back. Right-click, and you can do add track, which will add 1 track, or you can do add tracks. Okay, so let's go ahead and do add track, and it just added a 4th a video track, and I think it also added probably, no, it didn't. It only added a video track, right? Because I was probably up here, but you can't really see it. I have to reposition this down here a little bit, and there it is, right? So it gave me a 4th video layer, okay? If I wanted to add multiple layers, then I would go to add tracks. And when I do this, it gives me a little dialog box. Okay, let me do that again, right? Right click, go add tracks. This gives me a dialog box, and I can add, for example, technically, I can have up to 99 video tracks and 99 audio tracks. So you can add audio tracks on here. If I wanted to add like 2 more video tracks and come down here and say, I want to add 2 more audio tracks. You can select the type of audio track, which is right now it's the standard. You can do 5.1, mono, etc. And you can also decide where those new video tracks will go. In this case, generally you're stacking them on top of the most foreground layer, which right now is 4, but you can also put them in other places. So I'm going to leave it 4, and I'm going to hit OK. And now let me push this up so you can see everything. Now I've got 6 layers. And if I sort of squeeze down my audio, I've got 5 audio tracks. So as I said last week, I think there was somebody who does a lot of audio. You know, you can do some pretty good multi-track audio editing. Again, as I said last week, Premiere is a very great one-stop comprehensive editing program. And obviously, as you get into more specialized things, then you use things like Illustrator, Photoshop, After Effects. But for one program, Premiere really does quite a lot. And we'll get into something called the essential graphics when we get into project 3. And that is really gives it a lot of versatility. Okay. Let me hold out for a second here. How's everybody doing? Is this gauge my speed? Am I going too fast, too slow? I know for some of you, I could probably be going a lot quicker, but I have to kind of split the middle here because we've got people from all the different proficiencies. Okay. All right. So I'll keep kind of going at the pace, and we're not going to take a break because it's already 7:10 and we only go till about 8. So we're just going to keep working through the program and get acquainted with it, and then take a look at some Blackboard stuff before we log off. All right. So let me go back. All right. So now, okay. So those are all those tracks. We don't really need them. So I'm just going to I'm going to resize my sequence a little bit here so I can make my panels a little bigger. You see how I did that? Right? Very flexible. And I'm going to maybe push this over to the left. And there we go. And as long as I can see, I'm going to make my audio a little skinnier. There it is. Okay. All right. If you want, you can make your video a little taller so you can reveal a little bit of that thumbnail. All right. So as I go forward here, I'm going to do Control S or Command S just to save and update what you're doing. All right. So now let's make an edit. Let's add another shot. Okay. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this playhead and we're going to position it at the end of this clip. Now you can do it manually, but then you really got to like pay attention. And if you are going to do something like that, you can also magnify any section. You notice as I'm moving through these numbers, these little notches are like really tiny, right? So I'm going to put my playhead right towards the end, right? And then I'm going to magnify this section. And I'm going to hit the plus key on my PC keyboard, okay? And that's literally the plus key. It's technically the equals key, but it has a plus and it's right next to your backspace key. Actually, let me go find the PC keyboard. Hang on a second here. I have the Apple one there. Hang on, let me go back. Where's my PC keyboard? Should have had that ready. But I think most people know what I'm talking about. Hang on a second. Let me go PC keyboard. Here it is. Let me just copy that and get that in here. Okay. That's not the folder I wanted. I wanted it here. Bear with me for a second, folks. All right, and here we go. So now we'll have the PC. There you go. PC keyboard. Here we go. Yeah, okay, here we go. Let me go ahead and share that. Where are you? There's the PC, right? And do I have the Apple one up here? I thought I did. Okay. Share. Right? Right. So I don't have like fancy Photoshop notes on here. But again, this is the plus key, but this is over here in the numeric keypad. And we're going to deal with that as well. This is what I'm talking about, the plus and the minus. And this is the same, basically in the same place on the Mac keyboard, right? Okay, so this plus, and you don't have to hit a modifier key. There's no shift key. Just hit it. It will magnify the section you're looking at. When you click the minus key, technically the dash key, it will demagnify that section. So here's what it does. Let me go back. I'm going to go into Premiere. And again, same basic keys on the Mac. So here's my playhead, right at the end. And watch what it does in the timeline. I'm going to hit that plus key, and it just magnifies that specific point in the timeline. Okay? And so that's called magnification. Sometimes I'll often refer to it as zoom in on that frame, right? And then I hit the minus key, it demagnifies, you see? And you can see that you can actually make your clip like really small, right? So that's not also there's no material change to your clip. You're just adjusting the display. Okay. So now if I hit plus, then I can magnify, and it always keeps the playhead centered on your screen. So you can go magnify all the way down to where you're looking at now. Each one of these notches, right? In the same distance a second ago, there were like 10 notches in this little section. Now there's only one, and these are actually individual frames. And when you're looking at the playhead, if you look to the right of the playhead, there's always this little flat blue line, right? See, I can go back and I'm hitting my arrow keys. That's the actual frame you are looking at. So I am literally looking at the last frame of this clip. If I go one more frame, and I'm using my left, right arrow keys, right? Speaking of left, right arrow keys, I'm using these, right? And hang on a second, share. Okay. Everybody see my mouse? Okay. What you're seeing on this keyboard, in this case, the arrow keys I'm using are the home and end keys here. This would be left. This would be right. These are the arrow keys. These page up, page down, we're going to use in a second. Same thing on the Mac. Okay, very important navigation keys. Let's go back. Where was I? There it is. Okay, so I am literally looking at the last frame. If I go to the right one more frame, first off, let me go ahead and click in the timeline. So that's active, right? I go forward, I see black, right? And why am I seeing black? Because there's no video there. You see, it looks forward. That is what I'm looking at. But this is actually where I want to park this before I edit my next shot and drop it in, because I want the next shot to butt right up against the end of this shot. Okay, so what's the best way to do that? Do you float your mouse really close, right, and then magnify? You could do that, and then you can see, oh, I'm only one clip away, and hit your arrow key and get to that point. Or you could do this. You could use your page up and page down keys, right? Let me go. I don't have my. Where's the Mac? I think everybody knows what we're talking about. Okay, so we're going to use your page up, page down keys. Okay, and here's what they do. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so if say I'm sitting in the middle of my clip, I want to go to the end of this clip, and if I hit, hang on, let me resize this here. Okay, I'll show you that shortcut in a minute. Okay, actually page down. If I want to position this playhead immediately at the very end of this clip, looking at that first frame of black, I hit page down, right? I have that clip selected. I have my timeline selected. I hit page down. You see how it jumps right to the end. That's one click. If I want to go back to the very beginning and the very first frame, I hit page up and it jumps back to that very first beginning of the frame. Basically, because these are cuts, it goes to the cut point, right? And so the most basic edit in video, in film, in anything is called a cut. One shot ends, the next shot begins. There's no other type of transition, but it is called a transition, right? Cuts are just boom, that shot ends, that shot begins. We'll get into a lot of other transitions like dissolves and little wipes, and then you will work with video effects where you can create like blurs and lens flares and all this kind of stuff. But that's a few weeks away. So this is the most basic transition known as a cut. Okay, CUT, right? All right, let's go back. Right, so now we're going to position our playhead at the very end. So, and you can see I'm just clicking here and it's just kind of following me. But to be very accurate, I'm going to hit my page down while I'm in the timeline on my sequence. Hit page down, and there it is. I positioned my playhead so it is right at the very end of my clip. And if I want to check that, hit your magnification, hit your plus key, and magnify, and there it is. It's right on where it needs to be. Okay, so there it is. I'm going to demagnify, and I'm going to demagnify a little bit so I can see the clip, right? So don't make any adjustments there. Have your playhead sitting there. Now we're going to pull up the second clip, which is going to be keys 2. And instead of double clicking, you can also just drag it into the source panel, right? So click, drag, gives you a little fist, let go, give it a second, and boom, this is the next shot, okay? And what this is also starting to get you to look at and understand is something called continuity. Okay, you've heard the term continuity all the time. You hear it a lot in political context, but continuity when it comes to film, video, editing is the shot flow, is how shots cut together. It's really not that complicated. And there's, if you ever watch the credits on a movie, sometimes you'll see like a continuity director. Continuity people work with directors and assistant directors to make sure that there's a lot of things that we look at. You look at if someone's smoking a cigarette in a scene, does the cigarette get longer during the scene? Because when they shoot movies and stuff, they shoot a lot of stuff out of sequence. So you have to keep track of where you are in the scene when you have things that you can't control. Somebody drinking water. You know, if they've been drinking water, why is the glass getting more full with water? You've probably seen some mistakes like this, you know, like microphones in the shot, but that's kind of a different mistake. Anyway, so continuity is just shot flow. So what we're doing here is we're going from one shot, right? Me coming down, grabbing the keys, right? So this is kind of the two-tier part, right? Last week I talked about, we looked at the syllabus and we talked about there's 2 levels to the editing that we're talking about in this class. This is sort of a dual objective, right? The technical objective, learn Premiere, learn the software, learn the technical execution of the things you want to do. the effects, the techniques, etc. And then why do you decide to do those techniques? Why does that shot stay up for 5 seconds as opposed to 3? And why do you use a cut as opposed to, say, some other type of transition? So these are the aesthetics considerations, right? And that's going to involve pacing, design, you know, the cerebral decisions of why the footage is going to look the way it's going to look, right? And as you think about what you want to do, the more you're comfortable with executing that, it makes it easier on your brain because you know what to click on, what to do, how to achieve that objective. Okay. We'll continuously layer that in as we edit. All right. So now we got the next shot. So our first shot ended with me exiting the frame, right? Now this shot, take a wild guess. And you can see again, I had to reposition the camera, right? So now I'm going back and getting into place, and I come down and I grab the keys. This is just after I grab the keys and I'm coming into frame. And I'm going to the door, right? So here, we're going to cut in right here at just as I enter the frame. You can see the key coming in on that right side, right? So go back. Let's just make it an even 8 seconds, right? So our end point is going to be at 8 seconds. Choose what you want to use to mark that in. You can click the mark in marker, or you can hit I on your keyboard. I'll go ahead and hit the little marker here just to put that in, and you can see I've placed that in place. And then I'm going to go forward. You can also, okay, just like we were just talking about the arrow keys on your keyboard, you can also, you can click on those. Here I'm clicking on the arrow keys, right? And it goes frame by frame. If you hold down the arrow keys, you can kind of play it in slow-mo. So I'm holding down the right arrow key as I come in, and then I can stop and I can slow down and click. So this is all, you know, preference as you get more into this, okay? And so here I'm going to actually cut just as I'm about to open the door, right? So let's make it 11:20, okay? So the playhead should be sitting where the playhead's sitting. This should reveal 11:20 on the left, over here on the left, okay? And then you mark that out, right? So you can see before this was I don't know how long the shot was. It was probably 15, 20 seconds, same kind of thing. But now this is only 3 seconds and 21 frames. So it's a pretty short shot. So the first one was like 5 and change. This one's like 3.5. Now we want this to drop down. We're not going to grab it and drag it down there. You can, but there's an easier way to do this. Okay. Let me open this up. There you go. I'm expanding the panel because some of my some of my buttons and options down here were covered up. So I've marked my in, and I'm going to check my in, go to in. I'm going to go to out. I'm going to double check my in. My in point should be 8, right? I said go to in, so it snaps. And by the way, this is called snapping. Okay, remember how I was talking about this this little blue magnet down here in the timeline? That's called snapping. When that's engaged, it allows you to do this here in the timeline, etc. So you want to have that. Actually, it doesn't affect it here. It affects it in the timeline, but it's good to have it. But it's still called snapping. Boom. It jumps to that point. 8 seconds. Check out. Go to the out point. 11:20. Great. Now you have these two buttons, right? One is called insert. One is called overwrite. Currently, right now, because there's nothing here, there's nothing to the right of this clip in the timeline, you can actually use either. They have different they have different results, but right now let's just go ahead and hit insert. Okay. And what this is going to do is just going to basically drop this clip and butt it up right behind this clip, because what you're doing here is technically known as a 3-point edit. Hence, you've got 2 edits here. 1, 2, and your third edit is where it's going in the timeline, right? So you mark the clip, you select what you want, and where you want it to go is right here where the playhead is sitting. So when you hit insert, boom, it literally just drops it. And the beauty of it is it also repositions your playhead right behind that second clip. So you don't have to reposition it. Okay, I'm going to do that again. Right, we've got the in and out. Right, we've got the playhead, which we set up a few minutes ago before we even did this edit. Right, and now we're going to do insert, and it just drops it in and repositions the playhead. So the advantage of that, if I undo it, if I grab it, I can still do it, but I have to slide it over and butt it up against the clip, So you may not do it in one fell swoop. It's going to take you a second to butt it up. But this is also an example of that snapping function right here with the snap and the timeline, because if you do this, and go ahead and try this, if you butt it up, do you see those gray little triangles that pop up right where it meets the other clip? Right? You can actually feel a slight amount of physical resistance. You can override it, you can keep pushing, but you got to kind of force it. And then what you're doing now is a mistake because you're wiping out the end of the other clip, right? And you want it to be right there. So that snap function is there to sort of protect you against going too far over the other clip, right? So you can do it that way, but it's not one click, right? So go ahead and try that, right? I'm going to go ahead and just delete this for a minute. And by deleting it, I'm not deleting any video. I'm not changing it. I'm just getting it out of the timeline. Everything is still intact. So try it this way, right? Boom, right? And the other advantage, of course, by this is it also repositions your playhead, right? I'm going to Control Z. If you drag it in, sure, you can butt it up, but now your playhead doesn't automatically reposition. But what you can do is you can hit the page down and it repositions. So there's more clicks. Okay, so again, these are all workflow options, right? What I do for a living, I'm a news editor. So I try to reduce, I try to be as efficient and fast as humanly possible because I have to be. I don't always have a lot of time. Okay. But anyway, these are a couple options. So get to know them, right? Let's go back. All right. So now, however you did it, make sure that you've got the second clip there. And actually, let's go ahead and just preview what we have here. Let's just take a look at what the two shots we had, right? So you can bring your playhead back to the beginning, or you can also just click and drag it. And go ahead and play your first two clips, right? Coming down the stairs, grab the keys, and enter the next frame. So this very basic action. Sorry, I don't have a high-speed car chase with explosions and all that kind of stuff. But this is very basic continuity, right? And let's do the last shot, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay? And so the other thing you're looking at here is if you go to the end of this second clip, I'm going to hit page down. The position of that playhead, you can also see a number over here. So right now, that position of the playhead right now is the current duration of those two clips. So you're about 9.5 seconds long. Okay. And so there's a lot of things happening. The time code, these notches, these frames allow you to be within, when you think about it, since it's 30 frames per second, it allows you to be within 1/30th of a second accuracy, right? That's pretty accurate, right? So that's why you have to have that time code, why those numbers are critical, okay? It allows you to be very, very precise with where you choose to edit, where you choose to start a shot and end a shot. Okay, now let's go to the third one, which is walkout. You can drag it in, double click it. I'm just going to double click it. Give it a minute. Okay, it had a second where it had to sort of latch. So now we've completely repositioned the camera, right? You're going to see me walking in from the right because oh, there it is. That was take 4. That's my little slate. And then I walk in, right? Because I have to start recording the camera, so I have to go in and get into position. So now I'm just simply going to walk out, right? Here we go. Anytime. There we go. I walk out here and I exit the frame again. Okay. All right. So since the last shot since the last shot ended with me literally just about to open the door, take a wild guess where the endpoint of this is going to be. This is the idea of this being continuous action, like in real time, right? There's no time, there's no change in time and place. This is happening like in real time. I'm getting my keys, I'm getting out of the house, and I'm going to get in the car. We won't get that far today. We will next week. All right. So now we're just cutting to a different angle and I'm opening the door. Right. So now the endpoint here is going to be just as that door is about to open because I'm literally one frame from opening it. So we'll go to the point where you can just see it starting to open. You see that? It's right around 30. Let's call it like 30:08. 30 seconds and 8 frames. And you can see this whole clip is 42 seconds long. So we're pretty much towards the end of it, right? So you'll go to that number. But I'm going to show you something else, okay? And you might get mad at me when I show you this, but this is yet another way to do this. So if I tell you in advance, go to 30 seconds and 8 frames on this clip, right? And you're like scrolling around. Okay, that's going to be somewhere right around here. You can do it this way, right? You can find it. You can hit your little arrow keys here. You can hit them on the keyboard. But guess what you can also do? You can also just type it in. So even though if it's sitting over here, and this is why it's important to know how to read time code, right? You read it, remember, it goes from right to left, right? Not like we're used to reading, we read left to right. But this is the opposite, time code, right? The lower value is on the right, the higher value is on the left. So 30:08, right, which technically be like 3008, we're going to type it in. So we can come right here and type it in into this window, okay? And you don't have to type all 6, I'm sorry, those are 8 numbers. All you have to do is type in the extent of the value, which is only seconds. So you can literally, right, click on this. And by the way, whenever you see red text, I'm sorry, blue text like this is known as a hot text field. Hot, H-O-T, text field. That means you can click on it, change the value. Again, Adobe folks are probably well familiar with that. Nothing new there. So click on that and type in 30:08. That's all you have to type in. And it automatically knows because it's reading right to left. Well, this is 30 seconds and 8 frames, right? You have to include the 0 for the 8. Otherwise, it's going to be confused, right? So you hit enter on your keyboard, right? On your numeric keypad. Hang on, let's go to the numeric keypad there, right? So everybody knows what I'm talking about. Okay. So you can hit enter right down here. This is your numeric keypad where you can punch in numbers. We'll talk more about that next week, right? And when you hit enter, stop. Windows closed. Yes, I know. Sorry. Okay. Boom. Go back. Okay. Let me do it again. Okay. So I'm way over here. I click in. I type in 30:08. It doesn't matter what it's reading. You just click it and type in your number. Hit enter. It applies it, and it goes and finds that point. Right? The playhead goes right to that point. Now you mark your endpoint. Hit I or go ahead and just click right here, mark in. So now that's your endpoint, right? And if you want to just play that from right there real time, just hit the little play button here. This is basically like a media player, right? Hit play, boom, here I come. And you're going to take it and just really, again, as I exit the frame, right? You can see my foot still there. Just get my foot out right about there. So that should be, that's like 35 even. Nice round number, right? So there I used my visual sense. I made the decision visually instead of the number where the out point was because I knew I just wanted to get myself out of frame. So now I'm at 35. Now I'm going to click out or hit O on my keyboard. There you go. So this shot is now 4 seconds and 23 frames. And then hit the insert button. Okay. Your playhead is in place. It's sitting at the end of the other clip looking for the next frame. Hit insert, boom, it drops it in, and it repositions the playhead. And now you've got your third shot. And that playhead is sitting at the end of that third shot. So now your sequence right, which is now growing, is now 14 seconds long, right? Right. So if you ever wanted to measure that, you just go to the end of the clip of your clips, position your playhead, and you can see where you're at. Okay. And so now do a Control S, Command S, save, right? In case you get, your crash. So now let's watch these 3 shots, this basic continuity. It's taking a second there to re-rack. So I've got 3 different angles, right? And go ahead and just play it. And you can also hit when you're in any of these windows, you can also just hit your space bar. It will just play. Okay. So here I come. I grab my keys. Boom, continue, go to the door, open, and there I come, and I keep going because I'm going to get in the car. Okay? So that is basic editing, everybody. Those are cuts, and those are shots. Again, I shot this myself because I just needed some material. I didn't like what we were using before. And there's actually some, like I said, some continuity rules that we're applying here. You notice that the camera, as I exit to the left, and then I enter from the right. So the camera, right? The first shot, the camera is looking that way, and the action is coming this way. Then I turn it around, and the action still coming from that side because it looks more natural. Right. So again, this isn't a production class, but the more you understand about the shooting aspects, the production side, and I'm going to layer that in a little bit, it helps you as an editor. But then again, that's also the director's job, the cinematographer's job to understand how to place the camera, which makes your job easier because they've kind of made that decision. So there's something known as the axis, AXIS, which is like the line of action, okay? And it keeps action feeling natural. If I had put the camera on the other side and not came in from the left, it would look kind of weird. Anyway, and I won't get too into it, but other things you look at, okay? You notice that I grab my keys here with my left hand, right? Pretty obvious, right? There's my left hand. I grab the keys with my left hand. In the next shot, what hand are my keys in? They're in my left hand. And when I go to the door, it kind of looks like I'm using my right hand, but I'm actually kind of like, I'm pulling it out with my left. See? I'm about to open the door with my left because you can see the keys in my right hand. And when I go to what we would call another shot, right? And look, right? The door is in my left hand, correct? Yeah, the keys are close, but I'm using my left hand. Okay? So all of that is not an accident. All of that is intentional. That's part of that continuity. That's part of shooting and editing correctly, right? Because this is supposed to be one cohesive action in real time. It's not like we're dissolving to a flashback and a dream world 30 years. No, this is like happening over the course of like 14 seconds, right? This is real, right? So that's some basic continuity, some basic aesthetic decisions, right? When you shoot that kind of stuff, okay? And so there'll be a lot more of that as we go into these shots as we go into project 1, okay? Any questions so far? We've got about 20 minutes. We're going to talk a little bit more of some other things, but is this making sense to everybody? Everybody still alive? You should be glad that we don't go till like 10:30, okay? Right? I've had those, okay? All right, making sense? Is the interface feeling comfortable for you?
Yeah.
Okay, because this is, when we're done, feel free to just keep playing around. I've got those tutorials on Blackboard. Of course, I'll record this and try to clean it up so there's not too much yammering, and you can practice it as well. All right, so all right,
I have
good.
a question.
Uh-huh.
Do we have any like homework that we have to do every week, or is the projects the only
The projects are
time?
going to kind of be the homework. Because we only meet a couple hours here, that will be really the projects that you'll be working on your own time. Now, I will budget some time in class to begin those projects. So, for example, project one will this project using these clips, but the rest of the clips, we'll probably do most of that here in class because it's the first one. But then after that, we'll spend more time in class uh, learning techniques that you can apply and use in your projects, right? And then that time, which would normally be the lab time. So if we were in the lab, like physically on campus, our first, hour and a half, if we had like a 4 hour class or a 2 hour class that met twice a week, right? Then we'd split it up. You'd have some time to learn technique and then you'd actually work in the lab. So that distance learning part is kind of like that lab slash homework part. But there'll be some stuff that I might throw at you. Well, when we do the midterm test, that will be online. We're not going to do it in class. We're not going to, waste an hour, hour and a half of class time doing that. That'll be something you just do online, and then I'll set that up. So the answer is yes, but not maybe in terms of traditional homework. All right. A lot of it will be preparing to work on your projects and refining the exercises and the techniques we'll learn in the actual remote session. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay. So I mean, what we're doing here is very basic. We're going to get into a lot more stuff. Let me ask the crowd. I mean, I know we got a basic breakdown last week. Has anybody how many people have done the kind of editing we're doing right now? I know some people have worked with Premiere. How many have done this type of editing, just straight sort of splicing stuff together? Okay. All right, so looks like a few of you. Okay. How many have worked with working with like layers and working with effects, motion effects, anything like that? Where
A
you
little bit.
keyframe and animate things? I know some of you are animators, so you're doing that bit also like in different programs. Anybody done that here in Premiere? I see a couple hands up. Okay. Okay. Because what I'll do next week, I still need to refine our class schedule, which will kind of give you an idea of what we're doing week to week. And I'll get that cleaned up. Not in Premiere, but in After Effects. Yeah, After Effects is where you do a lot of motion effects and video effects. But as I mentioned earlier, Premiere is very comprehensive. There's a lot of After Effects like stuff in here. Okay. Um, so it's a great way to sort of prepare yourself to jump into After Effects, down the road. All right. Okay. Is that a hand, Adolfo, or you were just still um
Oh, no, I was just like,
okay.
I forgot to put.
All right, no problem. No problem. So let's go back in here for a minute. So let's see. So we've talked about let's see, yeah, the panels, right? So let's reinforce project. This is where you house all your media. Source is one clip at a time, right? You can only work on one asset, one video clip, one audio clip, etc. at a time. Your program is showing you the sequence. You can see it says sequence. So you're seeing the compilation of the work that you're doing in your timeline, right? And then the timeline is really just the template, the panel, and but your sequence lives in your timeline. So this is your sequence, these three clips, these tracks, this name, and it lives separately from your clips, right? Right? And then you've got tools palette. We didn't really do much with that. And then here, there's not that much audio. You can see a little bit of sound. It's just sort of ambient sound of me walking, open the door, that kind of stuff. So you can see that whole interface. So that's the basic flow of Premiere. Now, In the remaining time, what I want to do, take a few minutes and talk a little bit about what's going on under the hood here. Not too much. We talked about settings, right? And speaking of settings, let me show you where else, if you were to create a sequence first, okay? So what we did here, I'm just gonna sliding this to make it smaller so I can make more room. All right. We didn't create the sequence first, right? We opened up a clip, opened it up in here, marked it in and out, and just dropped it into an empty timeline, and it created a sequence, right? It determined the format, the resolution, the frame rate, and it created what it felt was the best environment for that video clip. But you don't have to do it that way. You can actually go and create a sequence ahead of time before you even bring anything in, right? And that would be also, well, here there's a lot, there's just a lot to cover here. So in this panel, right, we brought this stuff in, which is imported, and we'll talk more about what importing is. We created a sequence. If you right click in this blank area, you get one of those drop down menus, right? And as I mentioned last week, there's a lot of right click menus, right? Right click here, there's a whole bunch of menus. Right click here, there's a whole bunch of menus. In the timeline, let's see, click on a clip, there's a whole bunch of menus. Well, there's a menu with a whole bunch of options, all right? There's a lot of stuff embedded in this, and a lot of that is also duplicated up here, right? So here, right click, here's just some more project management kind of stuff. New bin, you want to create a new bin, you can create a new bin here and name it whatever you want, more stuff, right? Or, music or whatever, graphics, right? So you can do that, type it, click away. You can also right click and you have the new item feature. And here's another way to import. There you go. I think that makes it 4, right? So this is a right click import. Okay. If you go to new item, you can create a new sequence, right? You have things like adjustment layers, black video, color mats, countdowns. We'll get into all that. But let's do sequence here for a minute. And when you click on sequence, now you get all these options here for different types of sequences. Hang on a second. Let me close that out for a minute. Right click, new item, sequence. Okay. And you can see that it's got stuff categorized in, these are a bunch of presets. So these are a bunch of preset sequence. So here's broadcast, and you can expand these folders, and inside they have all of these different settings, specific settings for different types of video. And you can see there's different numbers here when they're describing the frame rates, right? We got 29.9, but we also have 23.98. So this example right here, when you click on any one of these, it gives you all the specific settings, the specific characteristics of that setting. So for example, this one, it says time base, it's 23.96. This is actually 24 frames per second, right? And so there are cameras, a lot of the video cameras now, you can shoot in 24, you can shoot in 29, you can shoot in like 50, 60, all these different frame rates. Back in the early 90s, late 90s, actually more like early 90s, you had a lot of these smaller cameras coming onto the market. We'll answer this question. Why is it just 24? Because a lot of these video cameras, because they shot 24 frames per second, they tended to kind of look more like 16 millimeter film as opposed to the 30 frame cameras, which look like video, a little bit more flat, kind of like the video look. And then you had these 24, what they call 24p cameras, progressive, and we'll talk more about progressive and interlace. We don't want to blow up anyone's head tonight, because they had kind of like this indie 16 millimeter feel, especially if you shot like in daylight. One very popular camera was the Canon XL, I think it was the Canon XL1. They probably have whatever the new version of that now, I don't know what it's called, but that was a super popular camera, and it was a small camera, shot good quality video, and it was the rage, and it was a lot less expensive than the big broadcast cameras that were 30, 40, $50,000. You could buy one of these for a few $1,000s. So again, that goes to the whole disruptive thing. You know, that's when the industry started to just really get crazy, because you suddenly had people competing with equipment on their laptop. They had Premiere, they had, you know, other software. And then you've got these people who have spent, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and all of a sudden the person with the who invested $5,000, $10,000 could compete with the person who, you know, had put in $100,000. And that was very disruptive. But more on that, you know, that I'm not here to talk about that all night. So that's the 24p thing, but these are settings, right? And then here you've got again, you can click on any one. Here, let's click on this one. You can see here the right, your screen dimensions, 1920 by 1080. Okay. And then you've got HD 1080p. So P is known as progressive. That's why you see P. I is known as interlace. The big difference is interlace is traditional broadcast television. P is more now the standard, because most people are watching video on computers, on their phones, on their tablets, their digital devices, and the TVs also play P. P is progressive. It has to do with the way it presents the image on the screen. Anything you do online has to be progressive. We'll talk more about that. And here's some presets for social media. Okay. So here's some stuff called legacy. Okay, here we go. I was wondering, they changed this a little bit. So this is more of some of the new stuff. And then you've got legacy here for specific settings. So you can see there's a whole bunch of formats which are catered to specific formats in cameras. So here's, for example, digital single lens reflex cameras. And you've got different formats. You've got 720, 480, 1080. That's your HD. 480 is old standard definition. Again, I'm not going to go any deeper into that. This is how you can also create your own sequence to accommodate specific formats. And this is one of the reasons Premiere has actually been so successful, because what I was just showing you there is technically why, as they say, Premiere plays well with others, right? Because you can shoot in almost any format, so many different types of cameras, and Premiere is happy to work with it. And that's something they've worked on a lot over the years, to make that very compatible with all of these different formats, because there's, you know, just hundreds of different formats and codecs and all that stuff out there. We'll talk more about that as we go forward. Okay. I'll tell you a Final Cut kind of Final Cut story next week. Remind me, hey, Professor, you were going to tell us about Final Cut and Premiere. I'll tell you about that next week. All right. But before we go too far over, let me show you something real quick. So we talked about last week about how the difference between the media and the actual file. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this for a minute, and I'm going to pull up. Let's look at our project here. Okay, let me go back into the exercise. Okay, here's our exercise project for today. Everybody see my screen, right? Your screen is sharing is paused. Hang on, why is it paused? Hang on, let's go back. This is it. Okay. All right. So here's the folder where I'm saving my exercise stuff, right? Everybody see this exercise 129, this little purple icon, right? And it says Adobe
Yep.
Premiere.
Yep.
Adobe Premiere project. Yep, good, good. Okay, there's my timestamp. You see the size of it? It's 24 kilobytes. It's very tiny. Now you're like, okay, well, we brought a bunch of these clips in. So let's look at the clips that came in. Here's the folder. Let's open that up. Let's open that up again. And there's my 3 clips. You can see each clip. These two are about 65, 67 megabytes. Okay. So right there's about 130 megabytes, another 123. So we're looking at like almost 250 megabytes of footage. And then that's just the whole size of those clips. We imported those into Premiere, right? But we didn't really move any data, right? We just literally created a link to those clips within Premiere, which is why Premiere stays as a small file. Okay, it's kind of like you load software on your computer, but you want a shortcut on your desktop. So you say, yeah, add a shortcut to my desktop. So when I click on that little shortcut, I can go to the software. And if you delete that shortcut, it doesn't kill the software, it just deletes the shortcut. So if you, I'll end with this. If you go into your project, however, there is a hierarchy here, right? And I'll hit you with this a little bit more next week, right? The clips that you bring in here in the project panel, these clips here that we imported, these are known as your master clips. So they're top dog as far as within your project, right? Those clips sitting there on your hard drive, those are your source files, right? Your data files, your source files, okay? These master files, these master clips connect to that. Then when you open this up here and you make an edit and you drop this little 5-second clip into your timeline, this becomes an instance, okay? So this is just a sort of a reference clip or an instance, a reference to that master clip. So, okay, so what happens if I come here and I'm going to click and delete keys 1? If I hit delete, it lets me. No big deal. Okay, you just wanted to get rid of it. I'm going to put it back for a minute. Now what happens is if you go over here to the master clip, keys 1, and you hit delete, it gives you a warning, right? It says the selection you're deleting contains clip references in one or more sequences. If you continue, these clip references will also be deleted. Do you want to continue? 99.9% of the time, the answer is no, right? Because wait, I brought that in so I could edit it and drop the shot in my timeline. If for some reason the answer is yes, then yes, but you can see it defaults to no. So Premiere is smart. It's trying to protect you. So when you see stuff like that, don't just go, oh my God, read it. Okay. And that's that hierarchy, because if you get rid of that, then anything in your timeline is going to go away as well. And if you go and delete those source files, what's going to happen, you're going to still be able to project, but it's all going to be offline. Okay. And you also don't want to move those source files because that will also affect the link. We'll talk more about that. Anyway, so there's a little bit of that stuff under the hood. Let's go to Blackboard. And let's see. Yeah, really, just if you didn't get a chance to look at the material last week, like I said, I will edit this down tonight. Make sure you look at those proposals, at these tutorials. And hang on, let me go back here for a second. Week 1. Why is this not letting me do anything? Hang on a second. Okay. I am in some weird. Oh, you know what? Stop share. There we go. Okay. I wasn't correctly sharing that. Okay, here we go. No, it's still, I still got this hand. I'm not sure why I have this hand. Okay. Hang on a second. Okay, let's see what's happening here. Okay, right. Boom. Share. Go to select. Well, I don't want to. Okay, I don't know why this is not letting me select anything here. Am I doing something? Something's acting very strange here. It's not letting me select. Oh, I know why. Silly me. This is a grab. This is a page. This is not the actual website. Where am I? That's great, Nelson. Okay, here we go. Let's go to that. I was not. Here it is. Okay, here it is. No, that's not it either. Okay. Somehow I grabbed this and oh, it's not the actual site. Here we go. Okay. All right. Never mind. Here we go. All right. I got it now, folks. Sorry. I was confused there for a minute. Let's share that. That's what I want. Okay. All right. So here we are. Yeah, go away. Okay, week 1 material. So let's do it quick. Here's some of the highlight stuff we talked about here. Let's go to Windows for a minute. Wrap up with this. Download, open that up. So let's go through some of the stuff we talked about tonight. So this is some of what we were talking about tonight right here. Project settings and also specific attributes of our video. NTSC stands for National Television Standards Committee. If you've ever gone to buy a TV, you'll notice this written somewhere on it. And the whole reason is that everything has to have a standard. You have to comply with these standards if you're going to make a television, if you're going to create a camera, okay? And here's some principal attributes. We haven't talked about this yet, but this is the aspect ratio, which is the shape of the screen, okay? Old traditional standard definition was more like a square box. Now it's more of a rectangle, okay? So 16 units, 9 units vertical. So it's more of a rectangle. That's 16 by 9 HD. Okay. Let's go back here. Let's just kind of go through this real quick. There's your frame rate, frames per second. And this is the playback standard in the US. And the time code is actually it has sort of its own standard. It's called SMPTE, Society of Motion Picture Television Engineers. That's who came up with timecode. Believe it or not, when I started editing, I didn't have timecode on. There were machines that did not have timecode. Timecode has not always been around. Okay. And then here's what we talked about: proper project settings, optimize video playback, and compatibility of the source file. So take a look at this. Here's the interface we went through today. The project window, monitor windows. They used to call them monitor windows. They don't really call them that. They just say source, program, timeline. And your video moves from left to right, even though your time code is read from right to left. Here's a little bit of what we just talked about. This file relationship, what makes a project? The project file, think of it as a suitcase. Your media file, that's the actual data. That's what's sitting on your hard drive. There's the master clip, right, which is in your project panel and is related to that reference or the instance in the timeline. And then the sequence is the organization of your clips in your timeline. Right? So they're basically like thumbnails to the master clip, right? Time code. Here's the time code that we talked about, right? This is a great way to think about it. It's an absolute address for every frame of video. Every frame is accounted for. Because if it wasn't, you wouldn't be able to mark things. You won't be able to time things. There's no measurement, right? So counts hours, minutes, seconds, think sprocket holes. It allows us to measure time duration, etc. And of course, it allows us to be very accurate and precise. Okay. Here we got into this a little bit, right? We're looking at it's basically decision making. There are two basic stages, something known as your rough editing, which is kind of what we started doing today. We're just kind of stringing stuff together. And then your final editing, where you're really refining your piece, you're adding titles, effects, maybe you're doing color correction, all that kind of stuff. We can call this desktop editing, but we also call it non-destructive. Really, it's non-linear. Non-linear meaning that we can edit the beginning, middle, and end, or we can edit the end first and then go back and edit the beginning and edit the middle. So it's not, you don't have to go from beginning to end. And you edit clips, which we kind of already talked about. You don't edit the media files, right? Because when you edit those clips, the master clips, and you make those references in the timeline, you're not affecting the actual source media. All right. And then here's what we did a little bit more today, right? We set in and out points, basic 3-point editing. We start doing that. Go to timecode where you type it in. There's your in and out shortcuts. Insert overlay. We just started doing that. Most basic transition is a cut. And then we'll get into this a little bit the next couple of weeks with transitions, other types of transitions. And here's a list of shortcuts for the PC. And there's another version of this for the Mac. Okay. So those are all right there on Blackboard. Right. And you have the Mac version. There it is right there. Okay. I will go ahead and email those two pictures of the keyboard, and I'll try to post them here on Blackboard as well. So if anybody just wants to keep those as a reference, it can't hurt. Okay. Okay. So time flies. So for next week, take a look at this material on Blackboard. I will add the session from tonight, hopefully within the next day or two, and be prepared to continue editing. We're going to bring in a whole bunch of more clips next week. So I will send you a link during the week so you can have time to bring that in and have them ready. And then I'll have a script on Monday. We'll cover some more stuff and then we'll start actually editing project one. Project one it is for a grade, but it's kind of like a pass fail. So I kind of work through it with you. That way you get, hopefully everybody can kind of get to that same solid basic proficient level working with the software before we move on to project two. And I will also try to show you some samples of other projects that we'll be doing during the rest of the semester. So I'll do that next week as well. So you can see examples of what students have done in the past on those different projects. Okay, project 2, 3, and 5, because we do 5 projects. Okay, so project 1, don't get super excited about it. It's all going to look the same, but it's going to give you hopefully a good foundation to go forward.